Thanks everybody for tuning into my channel. My name is David Gold and I present to you a contrast of King David and Joseph, the son of Jacob. The theme of my contrast is character, with special emphasis on our sexual integrity. This contrast will prove beyond any reasonable doubt that there is no excuse for falling into sexual sin. Gain with status. Joseph was a slave when he overcame sexual sin, while David was a king when he failed. In other words, your status in life doesn't influence character. Your office, privilege, or placement doesn't make you. A man is a product of his choices, not status. The office, the privilege, the status, the position doesn't make a man, but a man makes the same. Let's look at religion. Joseph had no church, while David loved God's house. Simply put, your denomination or religion has nothing to do with character. Character is a product of your relationship with God and not religion or creed or belief. Let's look at literature. Joseph had no Bible, while David meditated on the law of God day and night. I don't care what you read or which religious literature you read or which holy book you meditate on. Even the Bible will not work when your love for pleasure gets higher than your love for God. In the last days, men will be lovers of pleasure more than God. Whatever book you're reading, even if it's a Christian literature Bible, it will not help when it comes to sexual temptation. What will help is your relationship, right standing with God. Let's look at timing. Joseph was tempted day by day by a persistent, willing, hot woman, while David saw Bathsheba only once. You see, character has no time limits or constraints. If you're a good man, you will be a good man for all seasons. It doesn't matter how many times you are tempted. A man of integrity will keep saying no and no and no and stand by what he said. Let's look at the workplace. Joseph was working when he overcame, while David was relaxing at home doing nothing. So your level of engagement or lack of it, or your work or occupation, doesn't determine your character. Of course, some careers like brewery and tobacco manufacturing are cursed by the Lord, and you would be risking to work there. But when it's said and done, there are still some people who will work at a brewery, but they will never drink. It is possible. So your workplace is not an excuse to sin. Let's look at company. Joseph was alone when he overcame, but David was always surrounded by a security team and servants to do his bidding. In fact, he told his servants to go and get Bathsheba for him. Bad company, the Bible says, ruins good morals. But in this case, we find a flip side where David had no bad company influencing him to get Bathsheba into his bed, but he is the one that created more company of sinners by his own lust. He told them to go and get that woman. Therefore, with or without company, the buck stops with you. You are the final responsibility to your own mess. Let's look at responses and the way people react to issues. Joseph decided to run away from the temptation, while David brought the temptation closer. You see, a wise man sees evil from afar and hides himself, whereas a fool goes ahead and is destroyed. How you handle your temptations makes or breaks you. How foolish to bring a temptation closer, a temptation that you know you will not overcome. Let's look at influence. Joseph preserved his family and offered his 2 boys for a generational blessing from Jacob. Manasseh and Ephraim got a double blessing because of their father's influence and integrity in a strange land. The problem with David is that his family went into chaos because of his sin, and fights and feuds broke out, more sexual immorality, rapes and murders, and polygamy and polygamous liaisons with a young man called Absalom on the rooftop of his house. This was because of what David had seen. God judged him and told him, David, you did this thing in secret, but I will get someone close to you who will do it in public shame, and I shame you for what you did. So we find that doesn't matter your influence, it cannot be a point of reference when it comes to sexual integrity. Let's look at environment. Joseph was in Egypt while David was in Israel. Egypt, according to Bible scholars, is an example of the world, while Israel is an example of the church, such that we can say Joseph was in the world while David was in the church. Though people say environment affects and influences people, it's possible to beat any environment blues if you make God your environment. Immediately, David got out of his psyche. Sin came in calling and calling fast. Joseph's secret was God's presence in his life. Our battle with immorality will never end until we become the people of God's presence. It's repeated around 3 times. And the Lord was with Joseph, and the Lord was with Joseph, and the Lord's presence was with Joseph. That is important. It is not that only God chose to be present in Joseph's life, but Joseph had also made the conscious decision of making God his current continuous partner. We can keep fighting immorality all our lives but still fail miserably. David was a man of war, a warrior, and he had fought all his life the battles of the Lord. In fact, David never lost any major battle. However, when it came to Bathsheba, he failed. Why did a warrior fail and a small young man who was not a warrior overcome? David failed because he was in the fighting mode all his life. He lost his battle with lust and admitted the loss by requesting Bathsheba to be brought to him. David would have won the battle against lust if he would have just stood in God's presence. Sometimes when it comes to lust and sexual immorality, it's not wise to fight with immorality. As long as you realize that you are fighting, it means that you're not standing. I repeat, when you find that you're always constantly fighting with immorality, it means that the presence of God has not become central in your life. It means you are doing a lot of compromising stuff, like being at home, standing at the balcony at the time when you're supposed to be at war. Any person that is fighting with lust, there is something that he is doing wrong somewhere. So the secret to winning the war against lust is not fighting it. It is standing in God's presence, is being a man of God's presence. The presence of God is greater than war. I repeat, the presence of God in a man's life is greater than war. That's why when the Lord wanted the Egyptians to perish at the sea, and when Moses realized that they were sandwiched between the sea and the Egyptians who were bent on destroying them, when he cried out to the Lord's response was amazing. Stand still and see the salvation of our God. Many a times the Lord does not want us to keep fighting the things that seem they will destroy us. What we need to do is just to stand still and see the salvation of our God. Does that mean that we should not run or flee from sexual immorality? Yes, Flight is not fighting. You see, flight is a mode, is a model of standing. When you flee, because God says, for every temptation, He will provide a way. You just supposed to flee. God provides a door and you enter through that door. You don't fight with immorality. You don't fight even with secret sin. You don't fight and engage them in a war. You don't go fighting demons of lust. Even if you continue keep fighting demons of lust, you will not overcome by doing so. Whereas it's true that demons of lust can be attached to your life, fighting them will not necessarily free you completely. The total freedom from sexual immorality comes from standing in the presence of God, living in the presence of God. There are times you don't need to fight. Even with the whole armor, we are not called to fight. We are called to stand and see the salvation of our God. Practice the presence of God like Joseph, and integrity will become a byproduct of your intimacy with God. He will rule our choices